Hi, everybody. Erica here from In the Company of Cards. You're seeing me twice in 2 days. That's one day after the other. That's a little bit unusual, but welcome to a Sunday conversation. We've not had those in a while. Oh, you know what I have to do? I have to turn that off. Hold on a minute, because that thing will ding, ding, ding. Quit. Okay. Um, and I have back with me Heatherleigh Navarre. We had her on a couple of weeks ago. Hi, Heatherleigh. So happy to have you here.
So glad to be back.
I had you here to do a little promo for the Kingston Tarot and Lenormand conference. So we'll mention that again. But I just want to say that you own the Boston Tea Room, which is not in Boston, you all. It's in Ferndale, Michigan. And how far is that from like Detroit, let's say?
Oh, we're right on the line. So 8 Mile is kind of the dividing line between Ferndale and Detroit. We're actually on 9.5 miles. So okay. Ferndale is Detroit adjacent. So what we call it around here in the Detroit area is we're Detroit-ish.
Detroit-ish. I like that. Hi, everybody. Glad you all made it. And Heatherleigh, it's more than because I know I have viewers who go to your establishment, and so it's more than a metaphysical shop, I feel like. So tell us what it is that you have there.
It's a community. It's a gathering space. We host everything from, donation-based weekly mindfulness meditations that we've been doing for, a decade and a half. A lot of people come in, they call it their safe space. It's a place where we're open 7 days a week. And yes, we have 10 different readers and they're offering all different kinds of readings, whether it's tarot and Lenormand or palmistry or astrology, all the things. But there's also there's a reading area. We are a bookstore and a candle store and a magic shop and all the things. Plus we have a tea lounge and we serve and sell over 60 different kinds of loose leaf tea. So people come in, a lot of people come in and use it as like a nice first date spot where they can gauge the woo level of whoever they're going on a date with. But friends come in for a cup of tea. We're serving a free tea of the day every day. So it's kind of a community gathering space, lots of sound baths and past life regression meditation and artists markets quarterly. And, we practice the wheel of the year. So there's always an event for that. So yeah, we have probably, I would say something like 20 events monthly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, and Heatherleigh is very well respected in the metaphysical space. She's known nationally. What's that sound? Are we having a feedback loop thing go on?
I don't know. I can't hear it on my side.
Yeah, I hear it on my side, and there's no reason for that, but okay. So anyway, she's someone you should know. We mentioned, I had her on a couple of weeks ago to talk about the Kingston, Ontario, Canada, Tarot and Lenormand conference. So we want to briefly mention that again. That's in the first week in November. What is it, the 7th? I don't know what the dates
are. I want to say it's like the second weekend, but I could be wrong.
No, it's the second weekend. Mm-hmm. Second weekend in November, where you and 3 other keynotes will be presenting during the course of that weekend. And I've spoken there myself. It's a wonderful event. If you're in the Detroit-ish area, it's just a little hop, skip, and jump north for you, right? Uh-huh. And so you're going to be one of the speakers, and I think that's terrific.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. Yeah.
So why am I having Heatherleigh back so soon? I wanted to get the housekeeping out of the way. That's why we did that. So it's not just like a repetitive thing. But the reason that I wanted to have Heatherleigh on, we had her on, a year and a half ago maybe, and had a really good conversation. You are somebody that I really appreciate because you are forthright, honest. Your heart and your politics are in the right place. And I thought it might be just an interesting thing for our viewers to hear me talk with someone as opposed to sort of orate and pontificate about the things that are going on in our world. Now, I did do a live yesterday. Hold on. Many presenters ask for this so they can't see. Okay. I I did a live yesterday on YouTube where I just had people put their questions, not personal questions, but their questions about the state of the world, the state of the country, etc. And two issues that did come up. One was the Stephen Forrest controversy about which has blown the astrology world apart, and we talked about that a little bit. The other was Jason Arday, the young Cambridge professor who lost his life to suicide because he was hounded by the British press. And it just, what have you thought about this at all? What are your thoughts about this whole thing?
Well, okay. So the Stephen Forrest thing is interesting to me. They're both, I mean, they're definitely related, right? And related by, look, I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but I feel like every time I have a conversation with you, they're related because they're rooted in the white supremacist power structure that we live under and that we've been living under societally for so long. And, you know, I love that you and I will get started having a conversation before we go live, before we turn on the broadcast, and we have to stop ourselves because it gets so animated. And you're like, wait, we're going to
I gotta hit the button. Yeah.
You know, and look, I first want to say about Stephen Forrest, I'm not going to pretend that I'm super well versed in this topic or his work, his whole oeuvre. But what I will say is to all the people who have become an apologist for like, oh, he's a white man of a certain generation, and sometimes they use the N-word because, you know, okay, boomer, they don't know, blah, blah, blah. Look, I work with a white male astrologer of that generation at work every single day, born and raised in the UK. It has never once come up that he would say such a thing. This idea that you can drop a bomb like that in the course of a teaching discourse, in the course of a conversation where you are not only sitting there with someone who's part of that community, you know, when you know it's such a polarizing word, like there was an intent behind that. No one can convince me that that was like unintentional, that was just a mistake. You know, we had something, it's similar but different here in Detroit. There's a very famous home rehabber who had her own TV show, and she loved buying properties. She was a white woman, blonde, very cute, very camera ready, and she would rehab these homes in Detroit, and she had this HGTV show, and she was recently kind of outed on camera using the N-word, and there was this whole thing of like, well, it wasn't said in malice, and it was an accident, and it was I don't care. You just don't say it. Any clearly reasonable thinking person doesn't do it. So when you're doing that in the company of someone who is Black to an audience that you have to assume there are going to be other non-white people in that community, you're doing it for a reason, and you're doing it to make a point.
Okay, so I have this term that I coined years and years and years ago. I call it cultivated cluelessness.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean? I didn't realize. This is the best one. Well, the culture has changed. And so you can't use that word. At what time was it appropriate to use that word? And I'll tell you what, Stephen Forrest is 77. That means he was around in the 60s. So he knows right from wrong. He knows up from down. And what's interesting is, again, I find him not that interesting. Yeah, I don't. I think whatever. What I find interesting is the support that he's gotten. People said, oh, this was the best one. Last night, Nancy said this one to me. She read it. Somebody said, I think it's insulting to Black people for us to think that they're so thin-skinned that a word like that would bother them. Call me thin-skinned then, because it bothers me. You see, I mean, it's just twisted logic. It's twisted
Yeah.
logic.
Well,
And
it's another way of saying it's not, we shouldn't be allowed to not say it. You should not be allowed to have a reaction.
right,
That's what they're saying. So
right.
they're still saying, you should be more thick skinned. They're shooting all over an entire group of people. And it's nothing but BS. They want permission to be able to make the same mistake or slip up or whatever it is. Look, I'm not saying that every white person has to be so actively anti-racist that they've never said or done anything in their entire lives. In fact, full transparency, I'm just going to get vulnerable with you. If you look up the Boston Tea Room, my shop, our most recent review, now in the past 6 months, we've had 55-star reviews, but we got one the other day that was a 1-star review, and we were being called out for racist behavior. Now, the incident that they were calling us out for took place around 7 or 8 years ago, and it had to do with a shoplifting incident where someone on my team, one of my employees, I signed their paycheck, made a bad call, and I didn't like it. It had nothing to do with the N-word or anything else, but the perception by this person who was pointing it out 7 or 8 years later was, this is a racist establishment. You were profiling a Black person. I don't know if that was true in the case of my employee, but what I do know is it's my responsibility as a business owner to make sure that never happens again. And I can't be blasé about it. And we had to institute new training that was formalized and that all our staff goes through it ongoing. So I'm not going to say every white person has to be 100% blameless historically. But what I will say is to be anti-racist in this world, in the world of metaphysics, astrology, esotericism, is to go above and beyond. This is for many people a spiritual practice. And my shop is our spiritual home for an entire community, which means everyone has to feel safe there. That doesn't mean that every interaction has to be perfect every single time. It means that you have to be cultivating and actively working on your presence, your communication skills, and that takes work and it takes effort. And so often these people who have reached this position of, let's say, power or influence within a specific field, they hear so much praise from their audience that they forget that their audience is in fact the teeniest, tiniest microcosm of the wider world. And they start to sit with that praise and they begin to believe that if they're thinking it, saying, or doing it, it must be okay because look at all these people who approve of it. It's a very narrow worldview, and I'm not interested in it. I'm not interested. It's why I so rarely read or follow straight white men, content creators, authors, diviners, whatever it is, because there's very little that they have to say that hasn't already been said. And I'd rather hear different voices saying different things that actually fit a much wider worldview.
Well, that is one of the things I think is interesting is because again, what I'm interested in is the reaction to him, is that it's what you said. Not only does he believe his own hype and believe, the adoring crowds around him who tell him how great he is, well, they believe it too. In other words, it's a very top-down, patriarchal approach, which I find fascinating because it's very old-fashioned. And you've got a lot of up-and-coming astrologers who are saying, okay, you're doing this evolutionary thing or whatever it's called. I don't know, evolutionary. It's very top down. Are there other ways to look at astrology? It's like anything. The example I gave yesterday was Lenormand. It's a system from the late 1700s, early 1800s Europe. Okay, and people read it a certain way, and they tended to always read it a certain way, and then had an understanding of it as a lesser system. In other words, it's the kind of system that if you want to know what the weather's going to be like when you're going to have your outside picnic, you could consult Lenormand. If you lost something, You can consult Lenormand and it will tell you. What they didn't realize was what I discovered about it, which is that it's a word system, right? So if it's a word system, can we not do everything and say everything with 26 letters of our English alphabet? Everything that's ever been said or thought in English was just with those 26 letters. Well, now look at this, Lenormand, we've got 36 cards. Can we not say everything with that? Why can we not tell more involved, complex, deep stories with this oracle than just, oh, you lost your book behind the bed? Right. And so that's what I did. And I call it an American approach. I call it a Black American approach, a griot approach, because it's a storytelling approach. And I will tell you that because languages, like astrology is a language, right? French is a language. Cards are a language. Languages, in order to stay alive, they have to morph and shift and change. That's why we don't speak Latin. People speak Italian because Latin is the root, yes, but they call it a dead language because nobody speaks it. So, but when you do stuff like that, the people who have always done what they've always done the way they've always done it don't like it. So I found that with Lenormand, people were kind of side-eyeing me. They still side-eyed me because what I wanted to do is to make Lenormand accessible to a wider audience, right? And I think that there are Black and female astrologers, young ones, who are looking at astrology and saying, okay, we've always done it this way, but could we not look at it that way? And of course, they are looked at as people are threatened, right? Yeah. And you're right when you say these issues are connected, because now we've got Jason Arde, young, vulnerable man. Was he flawed? Well, who is not flawed?
Right.
And I mean, I've seen lists of academics and historians, et cetera, who've been pulled up for lesser offenses and their careers have skyrocketed back up. So when they say one of these things is not like the other, well, I think the fact that he's Black made a difference and made the press more hostile, more violent towards him. And I said to you before we went on that my mother used to say, you have to work twice as hard to get half as far. Yeah. And she explained, we're not saying that you're dumb and you got to work twice as hard. No. It's just that by the time your excellence is recognized, you've already done 10 times more than somebody else. But what she neglected to say, because that generation didn't know this. I don't think they understood. I think they lived in hope, like we all did in the 60s. We thought if certain things happened, then other things would happen. And yet here we are. But anyway, what they didn't say was, because they didn't know, when you get there, right, you have to work twice as hard to get half as far. Let's say you get half as far. Let's say you get farther than half as far, like Arde did. Yeah. They are not going to throw you a parade.
No, they're going to try and knock you down immediately and consistently.
Exactly.
And this is, look, this is when people start to have this conversation with me about, well, it wasn't as bad as, because I always talk about the MAGA thing, better for whom, right? Not better for women, not better for non-whites, not better for non-Christians, and people will say, oh, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad. I'm like, okay, so now you want to argue with me with my living history, my lived experience? I have, I'm from Detroit. We are a Black city. We've always been a Black city. It wasn't just post-uprising in the 60s. And there's a huge community of upper middle class Black families in this community and always has been. And yet I grew up in a bedroom community where I was a food stamp kid and didn't have a lot of the, I'm going to put big quotes around this, advantages of some of my Black female friends who grew up with piano lessons and tennis lessons and all the things and Jack and Jill clubs and all of that. It doesn't matter. The color of my skin means that without nearly the education that some of those women had, without nearly the socialization that they had. I was able to walk into rooms and get jobs without anyone questioning my credentials. And it wasn't that I was lying about my credentials. People weren't even asking. They were just assuming that I had them. Whereas a Black friend of mine would go into that same room and get grilled, get raked over the coals. And she would legitimately have education and credentials that I don't have and never will. And it was still going to be harder for her. So this thing, if you're not of the establishment, this society continues to see you as a threat, or best case scenario, a fetish item, look what we have, look at our, and it becomes this very, especially in academic institutions, he didn't have any support. I mean, there's no institutional support is what I'm going to say. I can't speak to his inner circle or what his relationships were with his contemporaries, but we see it across race lines. We see it across gender lines, this continual othering. Nothing is ever good enough. And look, I'm not going to say this about the entire British press, but what we do know about the British press and what we've seen over the past 20 years is they will actively advocate for someone's downfall and death if it's going to sell papers. They don't care. And they've proven that over and over. And there are court cases where they've been held accountable. And so we know this to be true. So the idea that anyone like that specific reporter who went after him so hard should have a role in any mainstream press to begin with, they should have been thrown out of that job. But it's not actually about truth. It's not actually about journalism. It's about clicks and sales. And that's part of the problem.
That's the problem, is that, it's whatever the market will bear. That's the thing. If nobody was consuming this stuff, then they wouldn't be producing this stuff.
Right.
So that's an issue. Yeah, and I'm just looking at the comments. Basically everybody's saying that they're concurring. I think one of the things I've seen just in recent days in terms of the astrological conversation is people, and not just that, but the academic world, people are starting to ask themselves, people of color, I'm going to say Black people, are saying, okay, you won't remember this, but you may have heard this. Shirley Chisholm, who was, a great politician back in the day when I was a child in New York.
Bring that folding chair.
Yeah, that's right. She said, if there's not a place at the table for you, bring your own chair. I think it sounds great. That thing has been, quoted for decades. But again, everything could use a little coat of paint, a little refurbishment. And I think the refurbishment is, wait a minute, do I want to even be at that table?
Right.
Why is pulling up a chair at that table the be all and end all?
Yeah. Because you pull up to that table, you're still going to get the scraps, right?
Exactly.
Why not go build our own tables and gather people around it? I think of the Detroit activist tradition and Grace Lee Boggs and everything that was grown around that of let's gather different people in different rooms, make different decisions. But waiting to be invited, and then that doesn't mean that's just having you be a guest.
It's true.
Sometimes I think about that, bring your own chair. I just want to break the chair over someone's head, because I'm a little bit
Exactly. But, this is sort of a new way of thinking, because for years we thought that I integrated a school, and I was a little girl. I was 8. Okay. So I had been in a really bad public school. And so I'm in this public school, and I'm raising my hand because, I'm smart and I like to, and I'm going, ooh, the teacher's not calling on me. Calling on all the white kids, but didn't call on me or any of the Black kids. So I look around and I see that my Black friends are cutting up. They're not paying attention. So, and they'd say to me, Erica, why are you raising your hand? She's not going to call on you. And I thought, well, all right. So I decided I was going to do like the other Black kids. So I cut up. I didn't do my homework. And then it came time for a report card, right? And I said to myself, my mother is going to kick my ass because my grades are going to be so bad. I have done nothing all year just because I'm mad that this woman didn't call on me. So I thought, what the? So the report card came. A. But that really made me mad. Like, she didn't even care enough, the woman, the teacher, it was the bigotry of soft expectations, a certain form of it, right?
Right.
So I applied to this. My mother wanted to take me out of the school. So at the time, it was the 60s, and all of these fancy private schools in New York City were desegregating under duress. So they took me to one school, and what happened was my mother took me for the interview, and it was like an all-day interview, but my father picked me up. Well, my mother was Black, and my father was white. So the school rejected me, and they said I had a visiometric problem, which doesn't even mean anything. What it meant was I didn't look right because my parents were two different races, and that they didn't go for that. So I applied to a different school, and I had this interview with the headmistress, and I remember sitting in this chair. My legs weren't even thinking about touching the floor. That's how high up I was. And so she said to me, well, if we admit you to the school, and they left me back because I spent that whole year not doing anything, right? You'd have to repeat a grade. And she said, what did she say? You'd be integrating, Nightingale. We've never had any other Negro. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I don't think that's right. I said, my mother told me that integration is more than one. I think I'd be desegregating the school. And she looked at me and her eyes narrowed, and then she smiled, and then she stood up and put her hand out, and I stood up and we shook on it, and that was it. Yeah. And I will say, I was very conscious the whole time I was there, because she also said the rate at which we increase our minority population is contingent on your performance. Well, I didn't know what that word meant. Right. I figured it out with context clues, right? Mm-hmm. So I went out of my way to be above and beyond, because this was a beautiful place. I came from a school, public school, where they had like bars on the windows, like you were in jail. And it was dark like a dungeon, and it smelled like urine. And it was so bad that I saw there was a bad word on the wall, and I had to ask my friend in the second grade, what does that mean? And she fell out laughing because I didn't know what that word, F-U-C-K, I didn't know what that word meant. I didn't know. So to go from that to a place where they had polished tables with vases of flowers on the tables and art on the walls, and I could learn French, and I could learn, all kinds of stuff. And everyone was, they had uniforms, which I thought was so cool. And so that night, so I get in, and then it's the first day of school. I got up, must have been 4:00 in the morning, because I was like so anxious. I was so excited that I was going to go to this new school. So I got dressed in my uniform, and my mother came in the room, and then I assumed the position, which if you're Black is between your mother's knees, because she's going to comb your hair. And she said, so she combed my hair, she goes, when your hand is in the lion's mouth, you have to dance to his music. And I thought, is she confused? What I wanted to say was, I'm pretty sure it's a school day. We're not going to the zoo. And if we were going to the zoo, why in the world would I be in a cage with a lion? And what music is the lion playing? What do they have, like a record player? Or they move it with their But guess what? I was raised Black, meaning you don't ask that question.
Right.
You're taught in metaphor, right? And so your job is to figure it out. My mother would say, you'll understand in the fullness of time. And that meant not today, but later on when you're a big girl or when you're a lady or whatever. Okay. Yeah. So I go to the school, and sure enough, I was an anomaly. I was the exception. I was the this, I was that. But I learned my lesson hard when Martin Luther King died. So by that time now I'm in the 5th grade. And he had died, and it was evening when we found out. And the way we found out, we were all doing our homework, and my mother was cooking in the kitchen, and she screamed and ran into their bedroom and slammed the door. My father wasn't home, slammed the door, sobbing. So my brothers and I went to the front of the apartment where the TV was, because, you only have one TV, right. And black and white. And we saw what had happened. So all night long, I'm knocking on my mother's door. Can I get you something? Do you want a glass of water? Can I get you some? I wanted to say something, do something. She didn't answer me. She just, they killed him. They killed him. That's what she kept saying. Okay, so the next day, it's time to go to school. And I thought, what would Dr. King want me to do? He would want me to keep doing what I'm doing, which is showing these little girls what it's like to be around somebody who's different from them. Mm-hmm. Get to school, which is in a very fancy neighborhood, and I'm at the corner, the school's here, and I see all these little girls running towards me like a flock of blue and white birds. Their uniform is blue and white. And they looked really excited, and I thought, oh, this is going to be good. Maybe we're going to have a substitute. Maybe that's why they're so excited. We're going to have a substitute. Or we normally go ice skating on whatever day it was, but maybe they changed the day. We're going to go ice skating. Or maybe, I don't know. I thought of all these good things I could think of. And I thought, Erica, maybe it's not going to be that bad a day. Well, they get to me and they stop. And I'm like, hi, this is all my friends, right? And they were dead quiet. And then they looked around the room at each other because nobody knew who was going to talk. Finally, somebody said, Martin Luther King died last night, was killed last night. And I was like, I couldn't even talk. In other words, and then they watched to see what my reaction was going to be. So I cried, went up to the classroom, put my head down, cried some more. The teacher came over. She was very nice. Erica, you need to stop crying. And I couldn't. And then she gives me, a tissue. And then she says, you need to stop crying because you're upsetting the other girls. Now, mind you, I'm in the 5th grade. Mm-hmm. But it was like a red cape to a bull. I picked my head up and I said, if the only way the other girls are going to realize that what happened last night is bad for everybody is for them to see me cry, then I guess I need that whole box. I went to put my head back down on the table. She snatched me up out of my chair so quick, marched me to the headmistress's office. This is this woman who 2 years before I had a disagreement with. This woman told me I had to write a letter of apology. And I said to myself, oh, this is what my mother meant. Mm-hmm. When your hand is in the lion's mouth, you have to dance to his music. Yeah. I could refuse to write that letter. Then I get to go back to that school with the F word on the wall and the bars on the windows and the stench and the teacher that doesn't call on you. Mm-hmm. So I guess I have to dance. So I wrote the letter, but I learned a lesson. It was a bitter one. And I'm a little girl. So that's why when people say, white people, grown adults, I don't know. I don't get it. I didn't realize. I didn't see. I'm like, what? But I also realized that, okay, I did what I did. I was the only one. It was the era. But nowadays, even, there are people who will say, well, I was the first. In this day and age, how is that? Like, is that a good, how is that? I did that a half a century ago so that there would be legions of us. If you're walking into a place and you're the first one, right? Like a Jason Arday, the youngest Cambridge professor and Black on top of it. Right. In this day and age, they're only just.
Even in entertainment, you look at awards shows and just this recent spate of awards. It was like first Native American, first Black woman, first, like, in this day and age. And
This
that's
day
an
and age.
entertainment,
Yes.
let alone academic. So yeah, and let's just go back for a second, because that message that you were told by that headmistress is the message that I've heard so many people share, that like it all rests on you.
On you.
What a burden
Right.
we gave to this entire generation. That's a problem. We were talking in my women's circle recently about this idea of, especially in woo communities, there's this whole idea of like reclaiming the wild woman within. I'm like, that's really easy for white women to talk about. It's not easy for non-white women to talk about, because they've been told to integrate, behave, assimilate. Wild equals untenable, unacceptable, again, othering. It's like, we don't even think about, like, because it relates to us and it triggers something in us, oh, I can go barefoot and let my hair be natural, like the whole thing about, we've got all these states passing these crown laws to protect people in the workplace, and then we've got HBCUs now.
Yes, thank you. I'm so glad you brought that up. Okay, wait, because a lot of people might not know what you're talking about. Yes, so Tuskegee, which is a university, Black university, their board decided to tell people that they couldn't wear, men couldn't wear do-rags, which they wear, to get waves in their hair. That's why you wear a do-rag. Women cannot wear bonnets to school. Now, I'm 70 years old, so I'm kind of old. Now, the first time I saw that, I'm like, well, yeah, what are you doing walking out your house with a do-rag and a... But then I read an article by a young Black woman. She has her picture there with the bonnet on. It was the most brilliant piece of prose I've seen in a long time. And her point was this: what's with this respectability politics? In what world will what somebody's wearing on their head affect learning, theirs or anybody else in the room? And you think, you old-timey Black people think that if you look a certain way, right? If you speak a certain way, if you dress a certain way, that, you'll get, when you get half as far, having done twice as much,
right,
you will be welcomed at the table. And that's not true. It doesn't matter how much the part you look. And so, and I'm seeing young people, brilliant young people, saying, I can be brilliant, but I can wear my hair whatever way I want. I can wear on my feet whatever it is that I want. I can speak in whatever vernacular I want. And it doesn't make me any less brilliant. Why the respectability politics? But you're right that there is a schism. White women think, woohoo, let me just, like you said, but it's a very different thing for Black women.
It's dangerous.
It's dangerous.
It can be unsafe in a way that it usually isn't for white women, and the whole, I don't know. The bonnet situation is always funny to me because, I live in Detroit. I see people walking around in bonnets all the time. I didn't really think that much of it. And yet there's also, to me, when I think about women wearing bonnets going to school, I think about how people roll into school, how white kids in their SpongeBob pajama pants and their, also, let's talk about the difference it takes for a Black woman to have her hair done versus a white woman, right? The fact that you have an economy of time, especially if you're going to school and you're working, right? Get up, get to class however you can get to class.
That's right. I remember with when I was teaching, around prom time, the Black girls would get their hair done the night before, and then they would come with it tied up. But our school had a policy that you couldn't wear anything on your head. So I had to go to the Board of Education and break it down for them why these girls needed to be allowed to wear their hair tied up. But nobody was being disrespectful. It was to preserve the hairstyle that they had paid God knows how much for the night before. But,
Right.
Again, nobody thought of it until I went to the board and had to plead the case.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah.
I don't know. I think, I am really, I'm glad that I came up when I did, because I did come up in that time of the 60s when we had hope. I see now that was misplaced, but I'm glad that I thought what I thought when I thought it, because I couldn't have done what I did.
Right. Knowing the outcome, knowing the world we'd be living in now,
Right.
what a completely different childhood and young adulthood we would have had.
Right. But what I don't understand is, I do and I don't. I'm fascinated by, again, cultivated cluelessness. In other words, I think the culture rewards white people for being blinkered, having blinders on, not seeing things that are right in front of you. One of the things that I've always said about this horrible era that we're living in the middle of is I have one consolation, which is this. As a Black person, I have always felt as though America was a fun house. And, if you're going to the fair, where I lived in New Jersey, there was a fair every summer. And so you go through the fun house. And so, you might bump into a wall, or the mirrors are distorted, and you're fat, you're skinny, you're this, you're that. And then, but then you come outside and, everything's normal. But living in America always struck me as being permanently in a fun house, because I saw certain things that white people didn't see. And if you called attention to it, well, you were the crazy one. Well, what I'm so thrilled about now, and I see this a lot in my YouTube community, and I've got tens of thousands of people who watch this channel, is the fun house mirrors seem to have shattered. And no matter how people try to take those shards and paste them back, something's wrong. And people who before had no problem saying, la, 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 I don't see it, I don't hear it, it's not, can't say that anymore. And now it must be really discombobulating. You've got your women's circle. It must be really jarring to people to see what was right in front of them. But I had a friend when I was in school, and I never saw her in the summers, but I happened to see her this summer. And I'm talking to her, and she seems a little standoffish, and I couldn't think why. She had some friends with her, and I didn't know them. I thought maybe that was why. Come to find out, we get back to school in September. She goes, Erica, remember you saw me in the street? I said, yeah. She goes, I was 9 months pregnant. I said, you were what? And she was. And did I see it? No, because she's 15, I'm 15, we're on summer break. I'm not thinking about anybody looking so I get the idea of something being right in your face and your mind not computing it. So I have to say, I feel maybe it's my white side, I don't know, sympathy for white people who are just waking up. But my advice is, don't go back to sleep, because I get that it's very tempting.
Yeah. Well, it's depressing, because as you're waking up, as you're having these realizations, and for me, I started having a lot of them. I have a daughter who's Black, and she, she's not my biological daughter. She came to me through, kind of a backdoor fostering situation. But as a white woman trying to help raise this Black child, that's really when the awakening started happening. I also have very liberal, progressive parents, and I had a lot of friends, but, it was really the intimacy of the mother-daughter relationship that you start to see these dynamics, playing out. And it is so overwhelming and so frustrating and so frankly horrifying that it's like a depression. You go into this depression fugue state where you're like, well, I didn't have to think so much about terrible stuff and how people that I loved are actually complicit in this system and how I've been complicit in this system when I was asleep. So I understand that attraction. It's just not an option because these days I feel like half of our society is far too slowly waking up, and the other half is like becoming retro radicalized into this weird belief. We used to have this idea that, oh, all the racists are eventually going to die off.
Yeah,
that was they're breeding.
Yeah,
they're breeding and they're recruiting and they're proselytizing and they've got really good marketing campaigns. So, we've got to be in it for the long haul. We can't wait for them to die off because they just keep making more, And so the only option is to, kind of become this strident voice, which I have no problem doing it. I've been doing it since I first screamed in 1968 coming out of my mom. So, I'm not gonna shut up. I haven't shut up. There are plenty of people who would very much enjoy for me to shut up, but I don't have that option. And also I have to have compassion for my white sisters who are just waking up because I can't let them be the responsibility of Black women. I have to snatch up the white ladies, and show them this is what we've got to be doing, which is not like, look, I'm not trying to be some kind of white savior. I'm just trying to be a decent human being. And I'm very aware of the limitations of one person's ability to do anything. The best I can do is do my best in and amongst the communities that I'm in, and my best isn't always going to earn a merit badge, but it's all I've got. And like I was telling you before the conversation, I'm really blessed to live just on the border with Detroit, to live in a Black metropolitan area that always has been. And that, I think we need to be culturally and within our metaphysical communities talking more about Afrofuturism, experiencing Black culture, in our metaphysical world. If I'm looking for someone that I want to follow who is a diviner or an astrologist, I'm going to be searching in that little bar, Black, queer, trans diviner. Like, let's get the voices that are the most diametrically opposed to who I am in my personification, so that I'm not learning inside a silo, so that I'm not trapped in some orb and getting some new voices. And, so I love bringing out of towners here to Detroit. I've spent 20 years in a college town in Georgia that was, very white. It was... The South is so different than the North. I don't have to tell you that, but
don't they have their Christmas tree ornaments? Aren't they Black people hanging from trees in the South?
I've never seen that, thank goodness. But
apparently, it's a trend all of a sudden again.
Really?
In Mississippi, yes, people are hanging from trees. Yes.
No, there was a situation, I think it might have been the college town that I was living in, but it could have been a neighboring, maybe in Atlanta, college or university, where freshmen showed up for a big welcome party at the dean's house, and the centerpieces on the tables were beautiful crystal bowls filled with cotton on the stem, right? So there was this whole plantation vibe, and they were like, but it was just aesthetic. And it's like, even if it was just aesthetic, it was a really big misstep and not okay. And
well, so, like people having weddings at plantations.
Yes.
What? Mm-hmm. Or Gone with the Wind is their favorite movie. What?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there were definitely some fraternities, I won't mention them by name, in Athens by God, Georgia, that had some really culturally inappropriate parties that definitely rooted in racist themes. Definitely. But, I'm not going to say that, college culture and Greek life around the rest of the country doesn't also have those same things.
That's right.
But it is a very different, the the power structure in Athens when I was living, there was very much a white power structure. There was a large Black community, but it was, there was no power there, or there was no visible power in the daily lives of white residents. Detroit is not like that, and Detroit is, you're very aware that you're in a Black city when you come here to visit. And, I think that we should be doing more, I don't know. I just think that we should be celebrating that within the esoteric culture. I think about when you were talking about the storytelling aspect of how you divine and the griot, that oral tradition, there's very much, to me, that's very Southern. It's a very Southern style. And if we're practicing divination and we have to go back to the origins of the specific divination tool in order to find a context, then that's not really divination, that's recitation, right? We have to be able to bring it into contemporary society and divine there from our own roots, from our own places of origin. Otherwise, it becomes a dead language. I want my divination practice to evolve. So,
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. And I think people who don't grasp that feel threatened by the idea of that kind of morphing. What would you, two things. One is that you have an event in 2027 that I'd like you to talk about that. And then also, if you can give some advice, because I'm not white, so give some advice to my white viewers who want to know more, do better, and not burden Black people with educating them, or to do listening that's performative instead of
Okay, so it's a fun one, but let me tell you about GLADE first. So GLADE is the Great Lakes Area Diviners Experience, and it's an every other year event that we host in the Detroit area. And I'm glad you mentioned it. Even though we don't have a date for our 2027 event, we're exploring with some new venue ideas and some new structural ideas. So I will keep you posted, but it's
the great. I'll let my audience know.
Yeah. Okay. And then here's my advice to white folks who want to get it, but who are very concerned. They don't want to read Cast by Isabel Wilkerson, which actually is much more entertaining than you think. So if you pick it up, it's a brilliant read. It's beautiful. It's eloquent. It's lyrical. It's really so good. And it helps you. I can't tell you how many places in reading that there was like this click in my brain where like two things that had been like rolling around back there like in an empty trunk in the attic just fell into place. She's so good. So but here's my advice for white people who are intimidated about having to learn. I want you to go to your streaming service, and I want you to do a search for Blackish. And I want you to watch the entire series, Blackish, with Tracy Ellis Ross and the whole cast. And I want you to watch it starting from season 1, episode 1, all the way through. First of all, it's a delight. It's hilarious. It's relatable. It's family structures. But it also, they do this. Kendra Berry does an amazing job of like exploring the Black modern family experience in society, in the workplace, in education, in all the places. And it's just entertaining as hell. But you will come away from that not only having been entertained, but also, quote, getting it. And if you walk away from that whole binge watch without getting it, call me, because there's something wrong with you. So
I put both in the chat so that people have that. Yeah, that's good. Anything else that we didn't cover? I'm sure there's so much, and I'm going to have you back again. But is there anything that you'd like to leave the audience with?
Oh gosh, there was so much in my notes. I think it is, you know, look around at the communities you're in, whether it's an academic community, a professional community, a social community, and just take note of what the makeup of that group is and decide whether it's a table that you actually want to be sitting at. And, and find yourself a new table if it's not, because sometimes we just shouldn't have to work so hard, and we're doing it because we find ourselves in the wrong environments. And so it's okay to unfollow that teacher or that guru or that pastor or whoever it is, and go find someone whose values are more in alignment with your own.
Right. As I said yesterday, that the metaphysical community is a microcosm of the world. I mean, so you're going to find some of everybody, but when you engage in metaphysics and metaphysical practices, think about it. You're putting your body, your mind, your psyche, your soul out there, and you want to do your due diligence about whom you're allowing in to your aura to be all metaphysical about it.
Yeah.
Very important. I mean, I had to do that. I had to snip someone who'd been very influential with my just having the courage to go on YouTube, because I thought I was camera shy, and this person insisted that I wasn't, and yet I find out that they are not who I thought they were, and I had to. And it's hard, but you deserve to sit at the tables where you belong.
Yeah.
Someone put in Morrison, Baldwin, McBride, Hurston, Jemison. I mean, sure, there are, but again, I think Heatherleigh, you did the right thing by starting with something that anybody can do, which is flipping on their streaming service, flipping on a TV, whatever, and just listening.
Yeah, I mean, look, all of those authors are brilliant. I just brought home a copy of Zora Neale Hurston's Mules and Men, and I'm really excited to tear into it. I would even say, 3 of the books that we carry at the shop all the time are the Bell Hooks trio on love in American society, self-love, male-female love, whatever. So those are also really good. I would start with Communion, but, yeah, I'm looking at the people that I am talking to are intimidated by the process, and they may not be there yet. I want to wet their whistle and make them laugh and realize how, the process of self-evolution and coming to understand these things and put yourself in a position where you can proactively make changes in your own community can and should also be filled with joy. And Baldwin's really great at joy too. But yeah, and and for me, Tracy Ellis Ross and Jennifer, I can't remember Jennifer's last name, the grandma, they are sources of that. Like, let's access our righteous indignation, but let's not lose our joy in the process.
Exactly. Well, I'm so glad I had you back. I'll have you back again when we're closer to knowing the dates of Glade and all of that. And listen, if you'd like to hear more of Heatherleigh and see her in person, I advise you to check out the Kingston Tarot and Lenormand Conference in November. It is cold. I'm just saying, it is very cold, but that's what coats are for, coats and hats. And you will be joining 3 of our colleagues who are also terrific. And I think it would be a worthwhile use of your time and resources if you're interested in metaphysics, and Heatherleigh is going to be doing a great job there. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Erica. Anytime is a joy with you. So I'm just really honored to be invited.
Well, I'm glad that we have found each other a long time ago. And I know that I'm a great admirer of you for all the reasons that you know.
Same.
And so thank you so much. All right, everybody, I will see you all tomorrow, in our regularly scheduled format. I will look at some stuff for us, and there's always stuff to look at. So enjoy your Sunday, rest up for Monday, and I'll see everybody tomorrow. Take care.